One question that comes up often is, can you airbrush with Citadel paints? Well, the short answer is yes. And then the slightly longer answer is, well, it depends. So of course you can airbrush with a Games Workshop paint. This is actually a main thing that I do. Games Workshop, the range, like the Citadel paints, is probably my favorite. It's the one I use the most because it's the most convenient, and I'm one of the like 6 people worldwide that like these pots instead of dropper bottles. So for me, they are great, and I use them a lot. And again, the biggest like perks is they work fine, and also they are very easy to get. So availability is a big deal for me because I do a lot of commissions and whatnot. So I like them, and I airbrush with them all the time, and so can you. So as we've talked as we've seen in our series here, the Games Workshop paints are kind of broken down into different ranges, and so the answer to can you airbrush with Citadel paint changes, of course, based on the range. So let's go like from top to bottom here. If you look at like the rack that's in your local store, and let's talk about these really quickly. Here I got them all lined up with a couple of colors. So starting off with the base paints, and we're gonna talk about the bases and the layers first because they're, for all intents and purposes, the exact same. Okay, the bases and the layers, they're regular paint. Of course, the bases are a little bit, we've talked about this, a little bit darker, a little bit more opaque, but overall they're not usually thicker, right? There's not like a common trend. Like some are very liquid, and some bases are very liquid, some layers are very thick. There's no really no fixed rule for this, so you do need to thin them down. The rule that I usually use, again, I airbrush a lot with these. So most of my paint, when they're brand new, I pop them open, I fill them up with my thinner, like up to this little line here, like the top of the seal, I guess we'd say, the bottom of the lid. I fill them up with thinner, I give them a good shake, and that's usually just a little bit too thick to go to the airbrush. I need to add a little bit more thinner to get them to work. And then of course this varies, by shade. How long has this been sitting on the shelf, and all these factors, depending on what I want to do too. Do I want like a smooth coat, or can I go a little bit heavier and do a base coat? And just like every other range, there are some good ones and some bad ones. If you're just starting out and you're not sure where to go, reds and browns are the easiest usually, because the sweet spot of like how thin you need to thin it for it to work. Reds and browns are pretty much the best one. They are easy to figure out, at least in the Games Workshop range. Like you take Mephiston Red, you take Evil Sun, you take Rhinox Hide. They're really, really hard to fuck up, right? Because the sweet spot is really, really wide, so you can thin them down a lot before they really break down and they don't work. Just like every other kind of paint, base and layer, of course you can airbrush with them. Now finding the good ones and the bad ones is a little trial and error, and of course depending on your experience, you're going to find some that you like. I'm going to find some that I like. And yeah. Moving on to the dry range. You can't. Don't do it. Do not do it. Don't even try. Like, even if you thin them down in like an insane amount, give them a shake, and you go to the freaking hardware store and get the industrial paint shaker to get them into liquid state, why would you bother? So dry paint, no. Glad we got that one out of the way. Next up, I switched up my style. We're no longer going down the range. We're just going off the rate where I picked them from the desk here. But we're going to cover the entire range, don't worry. Next up, air. Now, of course, yes, the air range is made for the airbrush. Of course, you can airbrush with them. Again, this comes with the same caveat as all the other air ranges, which is, the main issue with air paint is if they're too thin in the pot, you're kind of screwed, which is like not really possible with the bases and the layers, because you get to thin them down yourself. Whereas this one, either you have to learn how to thin because they're going to be too thick, or they're going to be too thin in your bone, or they're just perfect. And then getting the perfect one is kind of a luck a little bit. The air range is overall pretty good. I've not, since it's not like a very deep range, and because I don't mind using the bases and layers, I don't really go into the air range for most of the paint. But the few I've tried, they've worked just as good as every other one. And as I've said in the air video, Lead Belcher probably my favorite one. I think it comes off great. It's not super shiny, which I like, and I've never had a problem airbrushing with it. So big fan of this one here with the airbrush. But most of the air range, the ones I've tried at least, pretty good. Moving on to the shades and I guess we can do shades and contrast. They're kind of the same a little bit. And so the important thing here, so first of all, yes, you can spray them. You can spray both of these with your airbrush, but, and this is important now, you will not get the shade or the contrast effect with the airbrush. So what happens when you spray these is, because they dry so quickly out of the airbrush and with the added pressure, they're not going to do the same like effect of like going into the recesses and giving you this kind of like shadow. Instead, what's going to happen is these will tint whatever color is on there in like kind of an even coat, right? The goal with these, when you airbrush them, is to get like an even and clean coat across the entire surface. And so that allows you like tons of cool effects. But you cannot, you won't get the, I brush on my Nuln Oil on my silver thing to get the shadows. That's not what's going to happen. Same thing with the contrast. You cannot go, oh, I'll just contrast, with blue on my ultramarines or green on my orcs to get this, shade base highlight situation. It's not going to do that. What's really cool though is if you do, black and white on your mini, like a zenithal primer, and then you apply contrast or shade on top of that, then you're going to tint your entire mini in the shade's color, and then the black and the white are going to do your highlights and shadows for you. So lots of cool things to do with the contrast and the shade, but they are like significantly different in terms of the effect that you are getting. The technical aspect of this thing. So obviously, the technical aspect, as we've talked in our complete like series, like deep dive, they're a little bit all over the place. So all of the textured ones, this a textured one? Yeah. So More Than Hurt, and then Armageddon something, Agaro something, Martian Iron Crust, I think it's called. All of these do not spray them, because they're there to make like a specific effect. And if you thin them down, first of all, half of them have like a sandy texture in them, so no go. You don't want to put your sand into your airbrush. That's like a big no. Even if you have like a super like basic like spray gun or whatnot, don't do that. And then the other half is like crackling paint. And crackling paint, if you thin it down too much, the crackling medium loses all of its potency, so it does not work. So you don't want to do that. However, a lot of the specialty ones, for example, the varnish, of course you can varnish with your airbrush, right? So this one here's the gloss one, but there's a matte and there's a satin varnish, which I'm not even sure they make anymore. Do they make satin varnish anymore? Games Workshop? I don't think they do. Anyway, maybe it's a matte that they don't make. Anyway, this is neither here nor there. So the varnish is very great. It's less protective. Like when I varnish my minis, because I play with them, and when I play with them they go to war because I'm clumsy. So in terms of like the protection, varnish with an airbrush is much less protective. But in terms of an effect, for example, toning down bright colors with like matte varnish, or getting a good clean coat of glossy varnish to apply decals or to apply oil shades, for example, you can do that with an airbrush. The biggest issue with varnish through your airbrush is that it is a little bit trickier to clean, because you cannot see what you are doing, right? So, you spray, I like this bright red because it sends a message. You spray this bright red. Well, is my airbrush clean? I don't know. Is it spraying freaking bright red? But with the varnish, since it's transparent, sometimes you can't tell. So if you're not like super like proficient at cleaning your airbrush, this can be a little bit tricky. Like I have had friends that were like varnishing really quickly, and since they're cleaning technique was not great. They fucked up the airbrush because, oh, it looks clean. It wasn't. And then when this dries, it does what it's supposed to do, which is it clings into every panel and everything to protect it, and becomes like hell to clean. So that's kind of the little tricky thing. Another really cool thing about like gloss varnish and satin varnish is you can mix this with your paint and your thinner when you paint if you want to get like really smooth coat. This is like an old military miniature trick. Like this is an old school thing. But I've done that for a lot of times with my vehicles. Like if you want to get like really clean panels, add a little bit of satin varnish to them. Oh, it's just great. It makes the paint like you get like super silky smooth coat. So that's really for the varnish. And then of course there are a couple of like the technical ones which I would not really bother, right? Like the Nurgle's like snotty color or the blood for the blood god. Simply because again these are made to get like the snotty or the blood effect, and you will not get that with the airbrush. So there's really no point, right? It probably works, but why would you? And it also probably works a lot like the contrast in terms of like the finish that you get, because they're very much like kind of the same consistency, but they just don't dry the same. So you're gonna get something similar. So I would not really bother with those, because like you can buy the dark red contrast if you want the blood color, you're gonna be set. Whereas you buy the blood for the blood god color because you want to do a blood spatter effect. So that's what I would do with those. And then the last thing here before kind of we wrap this up here is the I think I talked about this a little bit in the air video, but it's great to like a reminder. You can't hear this enough, right? And it's even the air, between the air and the non-air, your colors are going to be different, right? So we talked about this. So the air lead belcher and the regular lead belcher, they're not going to be the same. If you airbrush both of them, they're going to have a different finish. And if you use this one with an airbrush and this one with a brush, also a different finish. So keep this in mind. Same thing for example, let's use the bright red again. Evil Sun Scarlet, when you use it, you're going to get a different finish. So it's never going to be the exact same as when you paint it. So that's always something to be mindful about. But for the most part, yeah, go nuts. Airbrush with it.